I ripped open the envelope in my bedroom, hand shaking so badly the paper nearly tore in half. My dad's words were sharp, deliberate, typed on his company letterhead like some kind of official rejection. You don't deserve college funding. I read it 3 times, each word hitting harder than the last. My mom sat on the edge of my bed, looking down at her phone, scrolling through something more important than my future. My sister Maya leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, and actually laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a real one. I sat frozen on my desk chair, heart pounding against my ribs, vision narrowing until all I could see was that single sentence. What the hell just happened to me? My hands went numb. The room felt smaller, hotter. My name is Emma Clark. I'm 17 years old. And I just realized my own family didn't believe in me. That letter wasn't just about money. It was a verdict on my worth, delivered without appeal, without mercy. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. Something cold settled in my chest, replacing the shock. Not sadness, something harder. I slammed my bedroom door so hard the frame rattled. My sister Maya stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall with that smirk she'd perfected over years of getting everything she wanted. Guess you'll be doing everything yourself now, huh? Her voice dripped with something between amusement and satisfaction. She adjusted her designer bag, the one Dad bought her last month without her even asking. I wanted to scream, to tell her exactly what I thought of her and her casual cruelty. Instead, I locked the door and sank to the floor, back pressed against the wood. My chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped steel bands around my lungs. Every dream I'd carefully built in my head, every plan for college, every vision of who I'd become, suddenly felt fragile as glass. The scholarship applications I'd printed out last week sat on my desk, mocking me. But underneath the hurt, underneath the betrayal, something else burned. Anger. Pure, clean anger that made my hand stop shaking. I looked at my reflection in the mirror across the room. I made a silent vow right there on the carpet. They'd see me, one way or another. They would all see exactly what I was capable of. I buried myself in school with an intensity that scared even me. Late nights became my normal. The glow of my laptop screen, the only light in my room, past midnight. Part-time jobs piled up. I worked weekends at a coffee shop, weekday evenings tutoring middle school kids in math. The scholarships I earned weren't just money. They were proof, hard evidence that I could survive without them, that their rejection hadn't broken me. My teachers started noticing. Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside after class, concern in her eyes. Emma, are you okay? You're pushing yourself awfully hard. I smiled, the same smile I'd practiced in the mirror. I'm fine, just focused. Friends asked why I never hung out anymore, why I'd turned into this driven, intense version of myself. I gave them easy answers about college prep, about wanting a good future. But the real reason burned inside me every single day. Exhaustion became familiar, a companion I learned to ignore. My grades climbed. Perfect scores, one after another. Every A felt like a small victory, a tiny brick in the wall I was building between me and their verdict. The payoff was invisible to everyone else, but it was coming. I could feel it. Freshman year at State University, I landed my first real internship at a tech consulting firm downtown. Walking into that sleek glass office building, I felt completely out of place among the polished kids from wealthy families. They wore expensive suits, carried leather briefcases, talked casually about their parents' connections. I wore a borrowed blazer and carried a backpack. My father would have scoffed if he'd known, dismissed this small achievement like it meant nothing. My mother would have called it cute, that particular tone she used when she wanted to sound supportive without actually being supportive. But neither of them knew, because I'd stopped telling them anything that mattered. I thrived in that office quietly, absorbing everything like a sponge. Business strategy, corporate structure, how deals got made in conference rooms over coffee. I learned about leverage, about timing, about reading people's weaknesses in their word choices. Every lunch break, I studied. Every coffee run became an opportunity to observe. The senior consultants liked me because I worked hard and kept my mouth shut. They had no idea I was cataloging everything, storing away knowledge I'd weaponize years later. On Friday afternoons, I'd watch the sunset reflect off my father's company towers across the street, just visible through our office windows. Soon, I thought. Not yet, but soon. I walked across the graduation stage in my cap and gown, the fabric hot under the June sun. The stadium was packed with families, cameras flashing, people cheering. My parents weren't there. I'd sent them an invitation 6 weeks earlier, even though I knew better. My mother texted that morning. Something came up. Congrats, though. My father didn't respond at all. Maya waved from the very back row, sitting alone, looking smugly bored like she'd been forced to attend a school play. I accepted my diploma from the dean. Summa cum laude honors announced to scattered applause from strangers. The weight of that rolled paper in my hands felt heavier than it should have. I smiled for the photographer, posed alone while other graduates hugged their proud parents. The bitter taste of their absence filled my mouth. But I wasn't the scared 17-year-old anymore, frozen in her bedroom holding that letter. I was alone, yes, completely alone. But I was also stronger than I'd ever been. That diploma represented something they couldn't understand. Proof that their funding, their approval, their belief, none of it mattered. I'd done this myself. Every late night, every scholarship essay, every sacrifice. Mine. Walking off that stage, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt transformed into something clearer, sharper. Purpose. My first real job was entry-level corporate hell. Coffee runs, endless spreadsheets, sitting in meetings where I wasn't allowed to speak. I worked for a mid-sized investment firm 3 blocks from my father's company, close enough that I could see his building from certain windows. Clark Industries loomed over the city in its glass and steel towers, untouchable, arrogant, exactly like the man who ran it. I didn't need revenge yet. That would come. What I needed was information, the kind you can't learn in business school. I observed everything with the patience of someone playing a long game. How decisions got made, who held real power versus who just held titles, where the cracks formed in corporate structures. I cataloged every weakness, every moment of arrogance, every assumption that comfortable people make. My boss was lazy, relied on assistants for everything. The CFO had a temper that made him sloppy. The board members cared more about golf schedules than strategy. I smiled politely through it all, stayed late, volunteered for projects no one else wanted. Every step was deliberate, calculated. People thought I was just another ambitious kid trying to climb the ladder. They had no idea I was studying them like specimens, learning exactly how this world worked, so I could eventually bend it to my will. On my lunch breaks, I'd walk past Clark Industries, just another face in the crowd. A coworker named Marcus gave me credit for solving a major client problem that had stumped the entire team for weeks. In a meeting with senior partners, he stood up and said, "Emma figured this out. All of it." My heart swelled in my chest, warmth spreading through me in a way I hadn't felt in years. The managing partner actually looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since I'd started. "Good work, Clark." He didn't know the weight that name carried for me. The satisfaction wasn't loud or dramatic. There were no trumpets, no celebration. But it was mine, completely mine, earned through sleepless nights and careful thinking. After the meeting, I sat at my desk and let myself feel it. The underdog power, the proof that I belonged here not because of my last name or my father's connections, but because I was good at this. Marcus brought me coffee later, grinning. "You're going places." I smiled back, thanking him. He had no idea how far I actually planned to go. That small win felt like lighting a match in the dark. It wasn't much, but it was enough to see by, enough to keep moving forward. I pulled up my personal spreadsheet that night, the one I kept hidden on an encrypted drive, and added another entry. Small victories building into something larger. Late nights at the office became my routine. Everyone else went home by 7. I stayed until 9, sometimes 10, usually alone except for the cleaning crew. That's when I started finding things. Irregularities in financial reports, small leaks in departmental budgets that no one bothered tracking, overlooked contracts that revealed opportunities, weaknesses in our competitors' strategies. I didn't act on anything yet. That wasn't the plan. Instead, I watched catalog, created detailed files on my encrypted drives. I learned which companies were vulnerable, which executives made emotional decisions, where the real money moved versus where people thought it moved. Our firm consulted for dozens of businesses across the city. Each project gave me access to privileged information, insider knowledge that I absorbed and stored away. I discovered that my father's company, Mighty Clark Industries, wasn't as untouchable as it appeared. Their quarterly reports showed concerning patterns. Revenue inflated through creative accounting. Contracts secured through relationships that were aging out as partners retired. The foundation had cracks. Maybe no one else could see them yet, but I could. I built spreadsheets tracking every detail, every vulnerability, every point of leverage. Patience was my weapon now, sharper than anger, more effective than rage. I wasn't ready to strike, but I was getting ready, piece by careful piece. I found a mentor in the most unexpected place. Malcolm Rivers was a quiet executive at our firm, late 50s, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He noticed me staying late, saw the quality of my work, and started leaving articles on my desk. Business strategy pieces, negotiation tactics, case studies of corporate takeovers. We never talked about it directly until one evening when he stopped by my cubicle at 8:30. "Coffee?" he asked. Over lukewarm office coffee in the break room. He taught me things they don't put in textbooks. How to read a room. How to identify the real decision maker versus the person with the impressive title. How to negotiate without showing your cards. How to build loyalty. How to recognize when someone's lying. How to plan 5 moves ahead while everyone else was focused on the next quarter. Every lesson felt like adding another tool to my arsenal. He believed in me, not because of my background, but because of my work, my drive, my mind. He didn't know about my father, didn't know about the letter, the rejection, the cold fury that fueled every late night. He didn't need to know. What mattered was that he saw potential in me that my own family had missed completely. Malcolm became the father figure I'd needed, teaching me the long game with endless patience. The phone call came on a Wednesday evening. My father's voice filled my apartment, loud and irritated through the speaker. "Emma." Not hello, not how are you, just my name like an accusation. I put him on speaker and continued making dinner, letting him talk. He complained about expenses at Clark Industries, about incompetent staff, about the burden of running a company. My mother chimed in from the background about appearances, about the charity gala next month, about what people thought. Then Maya grabbed the phone, her voice bright with excitement. She'd made another investment, something about cryptocurrency, using money Dad had given her for what she'd called a promising opportunity. I listened silently, stirring pasta, rage mixing with crystal clarity in my chest. They were blind, completely, arrogantly blind. They couldn't see their own weaknesses, couldn't see how fragile their perfect life actually was. They assumed the money would always be there, that success was permanent, that their position was secure. My father ended the call the same way he started it, abruptly, without asking a single question about my life. I set down my phone and smiled. They'd called to brag, to remind me of their world that I didn't belong to. Instead, they'd given me ammunition. Every word revealed their complacency, their vulnerability. Perfect. I pulled up my encrypted files and made more notes. The gaps in their awareness were becoming obvious. I earned my first major promotion at a rival investment firm, one of Clark Industries' main competitors. The offer came with a corner office, a significant raise, and something more valuable than either. Access. Real access to deals, to client meetings, to strategic decisions that shaped the industry. My new title meant I could now sit at tables where the real players operated. Each small success at this firm chipped away at the barrier between me and my eventual goal. I started building relationships with key figures, people who controlled capital, people who made decisions that moved markets. I was careful, strategic, never showing too much ambition, never revealing the full scope of what I was building toward. My reputation grew quietly. People started asking for me, specifically on projects. Clients trusted my analysis. Partners valued my insights. I was becoming someone who mattered in this world. Someone with leverage. Meanwhile, I tracked Clark Industries obsessively. Their market share was slipping, slowly but steadily. Dad's leadership style, all bluster and old relationships, wasn't adapting to the changing landscape. Younger, hungrier companies were eating away at his dominance. I watched it happen like studying a slow-motion collapse, cataloging every misstep, every missed opportunity. The distance between us was closing, not because he was reaching down, but because I was climbing up. Soon, we'd be on the same level, and then I'd rise above. The offer came through a headhunter, a chance to consult for a division of Clark Industries, brought in as an outside expert to analyze their operational efficiency. I stared at the email for 5 full minutes before responding. Coincidence? I didn't believe in coincidence anymore. Everything in business happened for reasons, through connections, through careful positioning. This opportunity existed because I'd built a reputation, because people knew my work, because I'd positioned myself exactly where I needed to be. I accepted the offer with a professional email, calm and measured. Inside, I felt like something had clicked into place, a key turning in a lock I'd been working on for years. My first day consulting for them, I walked through those glass doors I'd passed so many times from the outside. The lobby was marble and chrome, expensive and cold. Security gave me a visitor badge. I rode the elevator up to the executive floors, watching the city drop away beneath me. Every move now felt calculated, cinematic, inevitable. This wasn't luck. This was years of careful preparation, finally paying off. When I stepped into the conference room for my first meeting, I recognized faces from annual reports, from news articles, from all my research. They saw a young consultant, maybe a bit intense, probably trying to prove herself. They had no idea they'd just let the wolf into the henhouse. Inside Clark Industries, I witnessed the arrogance firsthand. Decisions made carelessly in conference rooms, contracts ignored because we've always done it this way, staff undervalued and ignored. My father's management style infected everything. He ruled through intimidation and assumption, never listening, never adapting. I sat in meetings where millions of dollars got allocated based on gut feelings and old relationships, rather than data. I watched executives dismiss concerns because they were too proud to admit problems. The company that had looked so powerful from the outside was rotting from within. Poor systems, outdated technology, talent bleeding away to competitors who actually valued them. Every day gave me new ammunition. I took meticulous notes, documented everything, recorded inefficiencies and weaknesses with surgical precision. My pulse steadied as I worked. The fear I'd felt as a 17-year-old girl, holding that rejection letter, was gone completely. Now I felt calm, focused, like a surgeon studying a patient before making the first incision. They thought I was there to help them. In a way I was, just not in the way they imagined. I was learning their vulnerabilities intimately, understanding exactly where the pressure points were, exactly where one strategic push could bring everything down. Knowledge was becoming power, and I was becoming dangerous. A mid-level manager named Tom Rodriguez became an unexpected ally. He'd been with Clark Industries for 12 years, worked his way up from entry level, knew every system intimately. Over coffee one afternoon, he confided in me about his frustrations. "This place used to mean something," he said quietly. "Now it's just about protecting egos." He respected my intellect, appreciated that I actually listened to staff instead of just executives. I never pushed, never revealed my larger plan. I just listened, asked good questions, earned his trust through genuine respect for his knowledge. Tom started giving me access to things I shouldn't have seen. Historical files, old contracts, internal communications that revealed patterns. He thought he was helping me do better consulting work. He had no idea he was handing me the keys to the kingdom. I learned about aging infrastructure, about dependent relationships with clients who were one retirement away from going elsewhere, about the financial house of cards my father had built through leverage and assumption. Each conversation with Tom added another brick to my foundation. He became loyal without knowing what he was loyal to. When the time came, I knew he'd be someone I could count on. Someone who understood that Clark Industries needed to change, even if he didn't yet know how radical that change would be. Late at night in my apartment, I started digging through public records and financial filings. Clark Industries was publicly traded, which meant certain information had to be disclosed. I found their quarterly reports, their SEC filings, their debt obligations. The picture that emerged made my heart race. My father's wealth was smoke and mirrors. The family house was leveraged to the hilt, mortgaged and remortgaged as he'd pulled equity out to fund lifestyle and business needs. The company itself was vulnerable, far more vulnerable than anyone outside the inner circle realized. Revenue looked good on paper, but the profit margins were thin. Debt obligations were mounting. The business was one major client loss away from serious trouble. I cross-referenced everything, built financial models, ran scenarios. Every number validated my quiet rage, but more importantly, every number revealed opportunity. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about a genuine business opportunity, a company ripe for acquisition, leadership that had grown complacent and sloppy. I could see a path now, clear and achievable, not through destruction, but through legitimate business strategy. The irony was perfect. My father had rejected me because he thought I wasn't worth investing in. Now I was going to prove that his own company was worth investing in, but only after I took it away from him. I set up my own legal entity through a lawyer Malcolm recommended. Clark Ventures, LLC, a name generic enough to avoid tension. I started making strategic moves in the market, nothing dramatic, nothing that would draw notice. Small stakes in companies, careful investments, building capital and connections. Every acquisition brought me closer to a position of real power. I leveraged my consulting work into new relationships. The clients I'd helped, the executives I'd impressed, they became part of my network. People took my calls now. People valued my opinion. I was no longer the desperate kid begging for college funding. I was becoming a player, someone with resources and reputation. My investment strategy was patient and deliberate. I targeted companies that complemented Clark Industries, building positions that would matter later. I cultivated relationships with institutional investors, the kind of people who controlled serious capital. Every conversation was a chess move, pieces being positioned for a game most people didn't even know was being played. My bank account grew steadily. The scholarships and hard work had given me a foundation. Smart investments built on that. Consulting fees added more. I lived below my means, saved aggressively, invested everything I could. By my 25th birthday, I had real resources. Not generational wealth like my father pretended to have, but real, earned, deployable capital. And I was just getting started. The board meeting happened on a Thursday. My consulting contract had been extended, which meant I now attended certain executive sessions. My father sat at the head of the table, gray hair perfectly styled, expensive suit, that confident posture of someone who'd never been seriously challenged. I presented my operational efficiency findings, careful, and professional. My recommendations would save the company millions, improve margins, strengthen their position. My father dismissed them with a wave of his hand. Too complicated, he said. We don't need some kid telling us how to run our business. The room went silent. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. I smiled politely, keeping my expression neutral, my voice calm. I understand. Just something to consider. I gathered my materials and sat down. But internally, I was noting everything. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment of underestimation. His arrogance was a gift. It blinded him completely to what was actually happening. After the meeting, several board members approached me privately. Good work, one whispered. Don't take it personally. I assured them I didn't, and I meant it. I wasn't taking it personally anymore. This wasn't personal. This was business. They couldn't see the storm coming because they were too busy protecting their egos to notice the changing weather. My father had just made his biggest mistake. He'd underestimated me one last time, in front of witnesses who were starting to doubt his judgment. Over the next 6 months, I made several subtle moves. Key contracts I'd identified as vulnerable. I helped steer toward competitors through quiet conversations with clients. Not sabotage. Just business, just clients choosing better options. Clark Industries started losing deals they'd considered guaranteed. I aligned with insiders who were frustrated with current management. Tom Rodriguez became a true ally, though he still didn't know the full scope. Others joined, talented people tired of being ignored. I prepared legal channels carefully, consulting with corporate attorneys about acquisition procedures, financing options, regulatory requirements. Every form, every clause, every loophole was examined. I learned the mechanics of hostile takeovers, friendly acquisitions, everything in between. Victory was invisible to everyone except me. The pieces were moving into position like a clock's gears, each one necessary, each one timed perfectly. My father thought he'd won that board meeting. He thought he'd put me in my place. He had no idea that his dismissal had actually accelerated my timeline. His arrogance had convinced me that waiting any longer was unnecessary. I was ready. The company was vulnerable. The opportunity was now. I scheduled a meeting with my investment partners, the institutional investors I'd been cultivating for 3 years. It was time to make the pitch, time to turn years of planning into action. Everything I'd built since that day I'd opened his letter was about to be tested. The family invitations stopped coming. Dinner invitations declined, my calls unanswered. At first, I thought it bothered me. Then I realized their absence was freedom. I observed them from a distance, documenting every mistake through public records and industry gossip. My father made a bad acquisition, overpaying for a competitor that was already failing. My mother threw increasingly expensive parties, posting photos online that screamed desperation for relevance. Maya's cryptocurrency investment collapsed spectacularly, losing everything Dad had given her. She posted vague, inspirational quotes about resilience, deleting comments that asked uncomfortable questions. Every misstep made the final act sweeter, not because I was cruel, but because it proved what I'd always known. They succeeded through luck and timing, not skill. When the easy money dried up, when the market shifted, they had no real foundation. I built my life on different principles: hard work, strategic thinking, genuine relationships with people who respected competence over connections. My network was strong because it was earned. My resources were real because I'd created them. Their world was collapsing in slow motion. Mine was rising steadily. The contrast became more obvious every month. I documented it all, not for revenge, but for clarity, for proof that the path I'd chosen, born from their rejection, was actually better than anything they could have given me. I spent 3 months in intensive meetings with lawyers, accountants, and financial advisors. Every detail of the acquisition plan was examined from multiple angles. The legal structure had to be airtight, the financing solid, the regulatory compliance perfect. My team was small, but exceptional people Malcolm had recommended, people who understood complex corporate transactions. We built the deal carefully. A leveraged buyout using my capital as the foundation, institutional investment as the primary funding, debt financing for the remainder. The math worked. Clark Industries was undervalued based on its actual assets and potential. Under better management, it could thrive. Under my father's continued leadership, it would slowly decline. We identified every stakeholder, every shareholder who mattered. We prepared presentations, financial projections, strategic plans. This wasn't a hostile takeover in the traditional sense. This was a business proposal to people who had a fiduciary duty to consider the best option for shareholders. Every form was filed correctly. Every clause reviewed by multiple attorneys. Every loophole closed before it could be exploited. My patience had transformed into something sharper than anger ever could be. This wasn't about hurting my father. This was about proving, undeniably and publicly, that he'd been wrong about me. That his rejection had created exactly what he'd feared. Someone better than him. Someone who would take everything he'd built and make it actually mean something. All the pieces finally aligned. Funding secured, institutional investors committed, legal documentation complete. The acquisition plan was ready. I sat in my apartment the night before we'd submit the formal offer, looking at years of work compiled into a thick folder. Every sacrifice, every late night, every moment of doubt had led here. The purchase offer was generous to current shareholders, above market price, with clear plans for improving company performance. The board would have to consider it seriously. Fiduciary duty demanded it. My father would fight, of course. I expected that, but the numbers didn't lie. Under my leadership, backed by serious investors and a solid strategic plan, Clark Industries would be worth more. Under his leadership, it would continue its slow decline into irrelevance. I called Malcolm that night, told him everything for the first time. The letter, the rejection, the years of planning. He was quiet for a long moment. "Emma," he finally said, "this is either brilliant or insane." "Maybe both," I replied. He laughed, that warm sound that had encouraged me through so many difficult moments. "Then let's make sure it's brilliant." The next morning, we submitted the acquisition proposal to Clark Industries' board of directors. Formal, professional, completely legitimate. I didn't call my father to warn him. I didn't need the drama. The business would speak for itself. The storm I'd been building for 8 years was finally here. I walked the streets near his office building, calm and composed in a way that felt almost surreal. The summer sun reflected off the glass towers, the same towers I'd watched from my first internship so many years ago. People rushed past in their business suits, lost in their own urgent worlds, completely unaware that something significant was shifting. Inside that building, my father was probably laughing at the acquisition proposal, probably dismissing it the same way he dismissed everything that challenged his assumptions. I imagined him at his desk, expensive chair, expensive view, reading my offer with contempt. Some nobody company thinking they could buy Clark Industries. Ridiculous. He had no idea who controlled Clark Ventures, LLC. The corporate structure was deliberately opaque, legal, but obscure. My name appeared nowhere in the public documents. He wouldn't know until the board meeting, until the presentation, until the moment of revelation. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel triumphant yet. I felt calm, centered, like an athlete before the big game after years of training. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about execution, about seeing if all the careful planning would actually work. I stopped at a coffee shop across from Clark Industries and ordered my usual. Sitting by the window, watching his building, I realized something. I wasn't that scared 17-year-old anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was just ready for whatever came next. The formal notice arrived at Clark Industries on a Monday morning. My lawyer delivered it personally to ensure proper receipt. The company was now facing a serious acquisition offer, one that shareholders and the board had legal obligations to consider thoroughly. I wasn't in the building when it happened. I didn't need to be. Tom Rodriguez texted me within an hour. Holy hell! Someone's trying to buy the company. Board meeting called for tomorrow. Emergency session. I thanked him for the update and set my phone down. Tomorrow my father would learn the truth. Tomorrow the office would discover who actually controlled Clark Ventures, LLC. Tomorrow 8 years of patient work would either succeed or fail. That night, I prepared my presentation with Malcolm. We rehearsed answers to every possible question, every potential objection. The numbers were solid. The strategy was sound. If the board acted in shareholders' best interests, they'd accept the offer. If they let pride and loyalty cloud judgment, they'd reject it. Either way, I'd know. I dressed carefully the next morning. Professional suit, hair pulled back, minimal jewelry. I wanted to look competent, serious, undeniable. I drove to Clark Industries, parked in the visitor lot one last time, and walked through those glass doors carrying everything I'd built. Security directed me to the executive conference room. The board was assembled, my father at the head of the table. He looked annoyed, impatient. When I walked in, confusion crossed his face. Then understanding. Then shock. Pure, absolute shock. The room exploded. My father stood abruptly, his chair rolling backward. What the hell is this? Board members looked between us, connections forming in their minds. My mother appeared in the doorway. Someone must have called her. Maya stood behind her, mouth open. I set my presentation materials on the table calmly. Good morning. I'm here representing Clark Ventures, LLC, the entity that has submitted an acquisition proposal for Clark Industries. My father's face turned red. You? You think you can buy my company? Not your company, I corrected quietly. The shareholders' company. And yes, I believe our offer represents the best value for all stakeholders. I began my presentation. The numbers, the strategy, the plans for operational improvement. Several board members leaned forward, genuinely interested. Others looked uncomfortable, caught between business sense and loyalty. My father yelled, made threats, tried to intimidate me the way he'd intimidated others for decades. I didn't respond emotionally. I didn't need to. The rules were clear, contracts enforceable, fiduciary duties explicit. His arrogance couldn't change the math. The board requested time to review the proposal properly. I agreed. Professional, composed, exactly what they needed to see. As I gathered my materials, my father grabbed my arm. I'll destroy you for this. I looked at his hand, then at his face. You already tried that, I said quietly. It didn't work. The fallout took weeks. Staff scrambled, uncertain about their futures. Board members wrestled with loyalty versus responsibility. My father hired expensive lawyers who found nothing wrong with my proposal because there was nothing wrong with it. Every form filed correctly, every regulation followed, every disclosure made. My mother called, her voice breaking, begging me to reconsider. Maya sent angry texts, then pleading ones, then nothing. I stayed silent through it all. Precision over emotion. The board met 3 times, brought in outside consultants, analyzed every aspect of the deal. In the end, they voted, not unanimously but decisively. The acquisition was approved. Clark Industries would become part of my portfolio with me as CEO. I would implement the changes I'd proposed, changes that would stabilize the company and position it for actual growth. My father was offered a generous severance package and a face-saving retirement announcement. He refused at first, threatened lawsuits that his own lawyers told him would fail. Eventually, reality forced acceptance. The business I'd built had proven stronger than the legacy he'd inherited and mismanaged. The day the transfer became official, I walked into the CEO's office. My office now. I stood at the window, looking at the city below, and thought about that 17-year-old girl who'd received a rejection letter in her bedroom. She'd been right to be angry, but more importantly, she'd been smart about it. I stepped into my office on the first official day, and everything felt different. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders, but it was a weight I'd prepared for, trained for, earned. My first actions as CEO were deliberate. I stabilized operations using the strategies I'd developed during consulting. I hired loyal staff, people like Tom Rodriguez who'd been undervalued for years. I implemented the changes that would actually make Clark Industries competitive again. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father had built this company, then slowly destroyed it through arrogance and complacency. I was saving it, making it into something that actually mattered, something sustainable. Outside the office, my family faded into irrelevance. My father moved to a smaller house, his retirement forced and bitter. My mother stopped posting on social media. Maya disappeared from my life completely. I didn't celebrate their downfall. I didn't need to. I walked away from them confident, thriving, unbroken. This victory wasn't revenge, though that's how they probably saw it. This was autonomy, clarity, proof of my worth that no one could deny or dismiss. Every decision I made now shaped the company's future. Every success was mine. Every challenge was mine to solve. I'd turned their rejection into rocket fuel, their dismissal into determination. That letter they'd given me 8 years ago still existed somewhere in my files. I didn't need to look at it anymore. I'd already written my response, not in words, but in action, in achievement, in undeniable proof. I'd shown them exactly what I was capable of, and it was so much more than they'd ever imagined.